The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador Zexthai clicked his four clawed fingers against the metal table. His green skin had turned pale, a sure sign that he was worried about something big. The other aliens in the room watched him carefully. They all knew that when Zexthai got nervous, bad things usually followed. "It has been 37 years, he said, his voice shaking slightly. 37 years since we last heard anything from the humans." The room stayed quiet. Every alien in that hall remembered the last message from Earth. It was short and scary. The humans had said they needed time to think about their place in the galaxy. Then they just stopped talking to everyone. Dr. Velnara, a tall blue alien with gills on her neck, moved forward in her chair. She had spent most of her life studying humans. While other aliens were happy that the humans had gone quiet, she was worried. "Very worried. The other species think this silence is good news," she said. "They believe we finally have peace because the humans are gone. But I think they are wrong, dead wrong." Commander Thorek, a big red alien with 6 arms, laughed. "The humans were always trouble. Remember the Zeta Prime incident? They turned a mining operation into a war zone in just 3 days. Good riddance, I say." But Velnara shook her head. "You do not understand humans like I do. When they get quiet, when they pull back and stop talking, that is when they are most dangerous. They do not retreat. They prepare." The truth was that many aliens had been happy when Earth went silent. Humans were unpredictable. They did things that made no sense to other species. They would fight impossible battles and somehow win. They would take broken technology and make it work better than before. They would make friends with their worst enemies and turn enemies into friends overnight. Most aliens liked things to stay the same. They had rules for everything. Trade happened the same way it had for thousands of years. Wars were fought with the same weapons and tactics. Diplomacy followed patterns that everyone understood. But humans changed everything they touched. The Centauran Alliance had been the first to celebrate when the humans stopped sending ships to their territory. Finally, their leaders had said, "We can go back to normal business." The Rigel Trading Company had quickly moved into space routes that humans had once used. The hegemony fleet had expanded into 3 systems that humans had claimed but never fully settled. For the first few years, everything seemed perfect. Trade was predictable. Wars were small and followed all the old rules. The galaxy felt stable and safe. But then strange things started happening. Deep space miners working in the outer rim began reporting weird energy readings. At first, nobody paid attention. Miners always complained about something. Broken equipment, strange rocks, bad food. But these reports were different. "I have been mining asteroids for 40 years, said Captain Vex of the mining ship Rock Crusher. "I know what normal space looks like. This is not normal." Vex had been working in a quiet system between the Centauran and human territories. His sensors picked up massive energy signatures moving through empty space. The readings were so big that his computer thought he was looking at a star, but stars do not move that fast. The energy pattern was unlike anything in our databases, Vex reported to his company. It was not Centauran, not hegemony, not any known technology. It was something completely new. More reports started coming in from all over the galaxy. Merchant ships traveling near human space would pick up strange signals. Sometimes their instruments would go crazy for no reason. Sometimes they would see lights in space where no lights should be. The most disturbing reports came from ships that got too close to human territory. 3 merchant vessels had disappeared completely. No distress signals, no wreckage, nothing. They were there one day and gone the next. The only clue was a strange kind of radiation that their sister ships detected afterward. "This radiation," explained Dr. Krell, the galaxy's top physicist, "does not match anything we know. It is as if reality itself was bent or twisted at those locations." The Galactic Council tried to investigate, but every probe they sent toward human space simply vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. It was like there was an invisible wall around human territory that nothing could cross. Some aliens thought the humans had all died. Maybe they had a war among themselves. Maybe some disease had wiped them out. Maybe they had just decided to stop being part of galactic civilization, but Dr. Velnara knew better. Look at human history, she told anyone who would listen. Every time they faced a big problem, they would disappear for a while. Then they would come back stronger than before. Much stronger. She had studied the old records from before humans joined the Galactic Council. When their planet was attacked by the Zorbak Empire, the humans seemed to vanish. The Zorbaks thought they had won. Then human ships appeared everywhere at once, using weapons nobody had seen before. The Zorbak Empire fell in 6 months. When the Crystal Plague threatened to destroy all organic life in their sector, humans went silent for 2 years. Other species thought the plague had killed them. Then they returned with a cure that not only stopped the plague but made all organic life stronger than before. This is what humans do, Velnara explained to the council. They take time to study a problem from every angle. Then they come back with a solution that nobody expects. But this silence was different. It had lasted much longer than before. 37 years was more time than most alien species took to develop new technology. For humans, who changed and grew faster than anyone else, it was like several lifetimes. What could they be doing with all that time? The question kept Velnara awake at night. She had spent decades learning to think like humans. She understood their love of solving impossible problems. She knew about their need to make everything better and more efficient. She had seen their ability to turn any situation to their advantage. If humans were spending nearly 4 decades working on something, it had to be big. Really big. I have run computer simulations, she told Zextai during one of their private meetings. Based on human behavior patterns and their rate of technological development, they should have advanced far beyond where they were when they went silent. Zextai's green skin turned even paler. How far beyond? If my calculations are correct, Velnara said slowly, they may have developed technology that makes our most advanced systems look like stone tools. The thought was terrifying. Humans had already been ahead of most other species in many areas when they disappeared. Their computers were faster, their ships were more efficient, their weapons were more accurate. If they had kept advancing for 37 years without any outside interference, there was no telling what they might have built. Some of the younger aliens on the council thought Velnara was being too dramatic. Even if the humans have new technology, said Councillor Brix, there are billions of us spread across thousands of worlds. They are just one species on one planet. What could they possibly do? But the older aliens remembered what humans were like when they put their minds to something. They remembered the impossible war, when humans had defeated an enemy that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. They remembered the great engineering project, when humans had moved an entire planet to save it from a dying star. Humans did not think like other species. When faced with a problem, most aliens would try to work around it or accept it as part of life. Humans would look at the problem and ask a different question. How do we make this problem stop existing? As the council meeting ended, Zextai looked around the Great Hall. Every alien representative was talking quietly with their advisors. Some looked worried, others looked confident, but all of them were thinking about the same thing. Where were the humans, and what were they planning? Outside the council building, the normal business of the galactic capital continued. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went. Traders sold exotic goods from across the galaxy. Tourists visited museums and entertainment centers. Everything looked peaceful and normal. But deep in the research centers and military headquarters, scientists and generals were asking hard questions. If humans returned to galactic civilization, would they be the same species that had left 37 years ago? Would they still want to be part of the Galactic Council, or would they have their own ideas about how the galaxy should work? Most importantly, if they had spent 4 decades building something new, what did they plan to do with it? The answers to those questions were coming sooner than anyone expected. In the dark space between stars, things were moving. Huge things built by human hands and human minds. Things that would change everything about how the galaxy worked. The silence was about to end, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Dr. Velnara stood at her office window looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were preparing for something. She could feel it in her bones. After studying them for so long, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when they were about to do something that would shock the galaxy. "They are coming," she whispered to herself. "And when they arrive, they will show us things we never imagined possible." She was right. The humans were coming, and they were bringing war machines that would redefine what was possible in warfare, in technology, and in the very structure of galactic civilization itself. Captain Thorax had always been too curious for his own good. That curiosity had made him one of the best research ship captains in the Centauran fleet, but it had also gotten him into more trouble than he cared to remember. Today, as his ship, Quantum Seeker, drifted at the edge of the Sol system, that same curiosity was about to change everything. "Captain," called out his science officer, Lieutenant Kex, "you need to see these readings." Thorax walked over to the sensor station, his blue skin rippling with the patterns that showed he was interested. The Quantum Seeker was supposed to be conducting routine surveys of empty space, but the instruments were picking up something that should not exist. "What am I looking at?" Thorax asked, studying the display. "A gravitational anomaly," Kex replied, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "Something massive is out there just beyond Pluto's orbit. The computer keeps trying to classify it as a natural object, but the energy readings suggest it is artificial." Thorax felt his hearts begin to beat faster. The Sol system had been off limits for 37 years, ever since the humans had gone silent. Officially, the Galactic Council had declared it a restricted zone to respect human privacy. Unofficially, everyone was afraid of what they might find if they looked too closely. "How massive are we talking about?" Thorax asked. Kex checked his instruments twice before answering. "Initial scans suggest it is approximately 800 kilometers long. Captain, that is larger than most moons." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member was thinking the same thing. No known technology could build something that large. The biggest ships in the galactic fleet were maybe 10 kilometers long. The space stations that served as capitals for entire star systems were rarely more than 50 kilometers across. 800 kilometers was impossible. "Could it be a natural formation?" asked Navigator Plex, though her voice suggested she did not believe it herself. Thorax studied the readings more carefully. The object was clearly artificial. It had straight lines and geometric patterns that nature never created. More importantly, it was generating power on a scale that made the biggest fusion reactors look like tiny campfires. "Take us closer," Thorax ordered, but slowly. "If this thing is what I think it is, we do not want to alarm anyone." As the Quantum Seeker moved deeper into the Sol system, the crew got their first visual confirmation of what they were dealing with. The main screen filled with an image that none of them would ever forget. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. The hull stretched beyond the edges of their view screen, a dark gray surface covered with patterns that hurt to look at directly. The metal seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making the whole structure look like a hole cut out of space itself. "By the ancestors," whispered Engineer Vorn. "What did the humans build?" The ship was clearly human in design. It had the clean, practical lines that characterized all human technology, but everything was scaled up to impossible proportions. Weapon systems that would be considered large on a normal warship were tiny details on this monster. What looked like fighter bays could have housed entire cruiser squadrons. "Captain," Kex called out, his voice shaking. "It is moving." Thorax looked at the sensors and felt ice form in his veins. The massive ship was indeed moving, but not in the way that something so large should move. It was accelerating smoothly and gracefully, as if size and mass meant nothing to its builders. "How is that possible?" Plex asked. "Something that big should take hours to change course, even with the best engines we know about." But the human ship moved like a dancer, turning and adjusting its position with fluid precision. Whatever technology was driving it was far beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. "Full sensor sweep," Thorax ordered. I want to know everything about that thing. The results were terrifying. The ship was not just large, it was complex beyond belief. The computer identified thousands of different systems, most of which did not match anything in their databases. Power distribution networks that could supply entire planets. Manufacturing facilities that could build other ships from raw materials. Life support systems designed to sustain millions of beings. This was not just a warship, it was a mobile civilization. Captain, Keck said quietly, there are more of them. The sensors had detected other massive signatures throughout the outer system. As the crew watched in growing horror, more ships began to appear. Each one was different in design, but all were built on the same impossible scale. Some looked like flying cities covered with domes and spires that glowed with internal light. Others were clearly military vessels, bristling with weapon systems that could crack planets. A few seemed designed for construction or manufacturing, with huge mechanical arms and fabrication bays that could build structures in space. How many? Thorax asked. At least 12 that we can detect clearly, Kex reported. But there are more energy signatures further out. Captain, I think there might be dozens of them. The crew of the Quantum Seeker stared at their displays in stunned silence. Each ship represented technology and resources beyond anything their civilizations could produce. Together they formed a fleet that could reshape the entire galaxy. Where did they come from? Vorn asked. How did the humans build all this without anyone noticing? It was a good question. Even if humans had been working in secret for 37 years, the resources needed to build ships like these should have been impossible to gather without someone noticing. The amount of raw materials alone would require mining entire solar systems. Maybe they did not build them here, Plex suggested. Maybe they found somewhere else to do their construction. Thorax nodded slowly. That made sense. Humans had always been good at finding new ways to solve impossible problems. If they needed more space and resources than their home system could provide, they would have found a way to get them. Captain, Keck said urgently, one of the ships is changing course. It is heading toward us. The main screen focused on the approaching vessel. Unlike the others, this one was clearly built for speed and combat. It was smaller than the massive construction ships, but smaller for a human megaship still meant it was larger than anything in the galactic fleet. As it got closer, the crew could see details that made their situation clear. This was not just a warship, it was a predator. Every line of its hull was designed for hunting and killing. Weapon ports covered its surface like scales on a serpent. Sensor arrays that could track targets across entire star systems rotated slowly as they focused on the tiny research vessel. Are they scanning us? Thorax asked. Yes, Captain, but not with any technology I recognize. The scanning beams are passing right through our shields as if they were not there. The human ship continued to approach, and Thorax realized they had maybe minutes before it reached them. He had to make a decision that could affect the entire galaxy. Should they try to run? Should they try to communicate? Should they simply wait and see what the humans wanted? Before he could decide, his communications officer spoke up. Captain, we are receiving a transmission. From the human ship? No, sir, from Earth itself. It is a general broadcast on all frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, with the flat, precise accent that characterized human standard language. But there was something underneath that calmness, something that made every alien on the bridge feel like prey animals being watched by a patient hunter. Attention, unidentified vessel, the voice said. You have entered restricted space during a period of active military operations. For your own safety, you are advised to withdraw immediately to a safe distance of no less than 50 astronomical units from the Sol system primary. Thorax looked at his navigation display. 50 astronomical units would put them well outside the system, further than most long-range sensors could reach. This is Captain Thorax of the research vessel Quantum Seeker, he replied. We are conducting scientific observations under the authority of the Galactic Council. We did not know that military operations were in progress. There was a pause before the human voice responded. When it did, there was something different in the tone, something that sounded almost like amusement. Captain Thorax, your scientific mission is noted and appreciated. However, the Sol system is currently undergoing final preparations for a major operational deployment. For the safety of your crew and the security of our operations, immediate withdrawal is strongly recommended. What kind of operations? Thorax asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The kind that will require the immediate attention of the Galactic Council, the human replied. You have 3 minutes to reach minimum safe distance before active defense systems engage. That was all the encouragement Thorax needed. Maximum speed, he ordered. Get us out of here now. As the Quantum Seeker raced away from the Sol system, its crew looked back at the fleet of impossible ships that humans had built in secret. Each vessel represented decades of advancement in technology, engineering, and military science. Together, they represented a force that could dominate the entire known galaxy. What do we tell the Council? Plex asked. Thorax thought about that as he watched the human ships disappear into the distance. How do you explain that humanity had built a fleet of ships larger than cities? How do you describe weapons that could probably destroy planets? How do you tell the galaxy that the species they had dismissed as quiet and harmless had spent 4 decades becoming something far beyond anything they had ever imagined? We tell them the truth, he said finally. We tell them that the humans have been busy and that everything is about to change. As the Quantum Seeker reached the edge of the system and began its journey back to Galactic Council space, Captain Thorax started composing his report. He knew that when the Council received it, there would be panic. There would be emergency meetings and desperate attempts to understand what humanity was planning. But deep in his hearts, Thorax already knew what the humans were planning. They were planning to come back to galactic civilization, and they were bringing enough force to make sure that when they did, everyone would listen to what they had to say. The age of human silence was ending. The age of human dominance was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 straight hours, and Ambassador Zextai could feel the panic growing stronger with every minute. Captain Thorax's report sat on the table in front of him, but the words on the page seemed impossible to believe. Ships 800 kilometers long, fleets of vessels larger than moons, technology that could make the massive structures move like fighters. This has to be some kind of mistake, insisted Counselor Brix, his orange skin flushed with disbelief. No species can build ships that large. The engineering alone would be impossible. Dr. Velnara shook her head sadly. She had been trying to warn the Council about human capabilities for decades, and now her worst fears were coming true. I have reviewed Captain Thorax's sensor logs personally, she said. The data is accurate. The humans have built a fleet of war machines that dwarfs anything we have ever seen. Admiral Krextos of the Hegemony Fleet leaned forward in his chair. As the galaxy's most experienced military commander, his opinion carried weight with every member of the Council. I fought humans during the Outer Rim conflicts, he said, his deep voice filled with grudging respect. Even then, their technology was advancing faster than ours, but this, he gestured at the report. This is beyond advancement. This is evolution. The truth was sinking in slowly, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. Sensor networks across 3 different sectors had detected similar energy signatures. The massive human ships were not hidden anymore. They were moving through space, openly, and they were everywhere. Intelligence reports had been flooding in since Captain Thorax's discovery. Long-range sensors detected human vessels in previously empty regions of space. Trade routes that had been quiet for decades were suddenly showing signs of massive traffic. Most disturbing of all, some of the human ships had been seen in systems that no known technology should have been able to reach so quickly. How did they travel so far so fast? Asked Counselor Yex of the outer colonies. Our fastest ships would take months to cover the distances these human vessels seem to cross in days. Dr. Krell, the galaxy's leading physicist, had been studying the sensor data with growing amazement and terror. Based on the energy signatures and movement patterns, he explained, I believe the humans have developed some form of space-time manipulation technology. They are not traveling through space in the traditional sense. They are moving space around their ships. The concept was so advanced that most of the council members could not even understand it. Space-time manipulation had been theoretical for thousands of years. Every major civilization had tried to develop it, and every attempt had failed. The energy requirements alone should have made it impossible. But the power needed for that kind of technology, began Engineer Vex, would be enormous, Dr. Krell finished. Which explains why their ships are so large. They are not just warships. They are mobile power plants capable of generating energy on the scale of small stars. Admiral Krextos studied the tactical implications with the eye of someone who had spent his life planning battles. Ships that can appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Weapons that can presumably destroy planets. Manufacturing facilities that can build more ships from raw materials. They have not just built a fleet. They have built a self-sustaining war machine. The room fell silent as the full scope of humanity's achievements sank in. These were not just advanced ships. They were mobile civilizations, each one capable of operating independently for decades or centuries. They could appear in any star system, establish complete dominance, and then move on to the next target while leaving behind whatever infrastructure they needed. What do they want? Asked Counselor Nex, speaking the question that everyone was thinking. Before anyone could answer, the Council's communication system activated. Every screen in the chamber lit up with the same image. A human woman in what appeared to be a military uniform, standing in front of a backdrop that showed the interior of one of the massive ships. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council," she said in perfect standard galactic. "I am Admiral Chen, speaking on behalf of the Human Expansion Collective. We apologize for the interruption, but we felt it was time to resume our participation in galactic affairs." The council members looked at each other in shock. The transmission had appeared on their secure networks without any warning or authorization. It should have been impossible to break through their communication systems so easily. Admiral Chen continued speaking as if she was addressing old friends rather than the leaders of species that had not heard from humanity in almost 40 years. "We know that our long absence has caused concern among our galactic neighbors," she said. "We want to assure you that this silence was necessary for the completion of certain essential projects. Now that these projects are finished, we are ready to take a more active role in shaping the future of our galaxy." Zexthai felt his skin go cold. The way she said "shaping the future" did not sound like a request for cooperation. It sounded like a statement of intent. "During our time away from galactic politics," Admiral Chen continued, "we have had the opportunity to observe how various conflicts and trade disputes have been handled. We have also been able to study the technological and social development patterns of our neighboring species." Dr. Velnara leaned forward, studying the human's face and body language. Everything about Admiral Chen suggested confidence and control. She was not asking for anything. She was explaining what was going to happen. "Our analysis has led us to conclude that the current system of galactic governance is inefficient and potentially dangerous," the Admiral said. "Wars are fought with outdated weapons and tactics. Resources are wasted on territorial disputes that serve no constructive purpose. Most concerning, technological and social development has stagnated across multiple species." The council members began to whisper among themselves, but Admiral Chen's voice cut through their conversations like a blade. "Therefore, the Human Expansion Collective is prepared to offer guidance and assistance to help address these systemic problems. We believe that with proper coordination and resource management, galactic civilization can achieve levels of prosperity and security that are currently unimaginable." Admiral Krextos stood up slowly. "And if we choose not to accept your guidance?" he asked. Admiral Chen's expression did not change, but something in her eyes became harder. "We hope that will not be necessary, Admiral. However, we are prepared to provide more direct assistance if required." To demonstrate what direct assistance might involve, Admiral Chen gestured to someone off-screen. The view changed to show the exterior of space, where one of the massive human ships was approaching a moon that the Council recognized as Rigel 7, a military testing facility used by the Hegemony Fleet. The moon-designated Rigel 7 has served as a weapons testing site for approximately 300 years, Admiral Chen explained. It is currently uninhabited and has no strategic value beyond its use as a target for military exercises. The human ship fired a single weapon. There was no dramatic explosion, no expanding wave of destruction. The moon simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a solid ball of rock and metal orbiting Rigel Prime. The next moment there was empty space where it had been. Not destroyed, not vaporized. Gone. As you can see, Admiral Chen continued, our technology has advanced significantly during our absence. We prefer to use these capabilities for construction and exploration rather than destruction, but we are prepared to use whatever methods are necessary to ensure galactic stability. The council chamber was dead, silent. Every member was staring at the screens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The complete elimination of a moon was beyond their understanding of physics. It suggested that humans had not just advanced their technology, they had discovered entirely new laws of science. You have 1 standard year to consider our offer of cooperation, Admiral Chen said. During this time, our diplomatic teams will be available to discuss the details of integration with our optimization protocols. We look forward to working together to build a better future for all species. The transmission ended, leaving the council members staring at blank screens. Counselor Brix was the first to speak. They want to take over the entire galaxy. No, Dr. Velnara said quietly. They want to improve it. From their perspective, we are all primitive children who need guidance to reach our full potential. Admiral Krextos was studying tactical displays that showed the positions of known human ships. The numbers were staggering. At least 50 of the massive vessels were now operating openly throughout galactic space. Each one represented more firepower than most species could deploy in their entire fleets. Can we fight them? Asked Counselor Yex. Krextos looked at the displays for a long moment before answering. We can try, he said finally. But based on what I have seen, it would be like insects trying to fight giants. They have technology we cannot understand, weapons we cannot counter, and the ability to appear anywhere they choose. Then we surrender? Brix asked, his voice filled with despair. We negotiate, Zexthai said firmly. The humans have given us a year to discuss terms. That suggests they would prefer cooperation to conquest. We need to understand exactly what they want and what they are offering in return. Dr. Velnara nodded. The humans I have studied were never cruel for the sake of cruelty. They genuinely believe they are helping. If we can show them that we are willing to work with them, they might be willing to work with us. But even as she said the words, she wondered if it was true. The humans who had left the galaxy 37 years ago might have been reasonable and cooperative. The humans who had returned with technology that could erase moons from existence might be something else entirely. As the emergency session continued, reports kept coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were appearing everywhere, not attacking or threatening, but simply making their presence known. They were establishing a perimeter around every major population center, every important trade route, every strategic resource. It was not an invasion in the traditional sense. It was something much more sophisticated and much more terrifying. It was a demonstration that the humans could be anywhere they wanted, whenever they wanted, and that no force in the galaxy could stop them. The age of galactic independence was over. The age of human supervision had begun. Whether that would be a good thing or a terrible thing remained to be seen. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chen's ultimatum, and the galaxy was splitting apart. Some species wanted to fight the humans, others wanted to surrender, and a few were trying to pretend that nothing had changed. But everyone knew that everything had changed, and that the year of grace was running out fast. Commander Vextel of the Rigel Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching human vessels move through his home system, like they owned it. 3 of the massive ships had taken positions around Rigel Prime, close enough to demonstrate their presence but far enough away to avoid seeming threatening. The message was clear. We could destroy you, but we choose not to. Any response to our communication requests? He asked his communication officer. The same as always, sir. They acknowledge our transmissions but say they are not authorized to engage in tactical discussions. All negotiations must go through official diplomatic channels. Vextal cursed under his breath. The humans had set up diplomatic offices on neutral space stations throughout the galaxy, but getting an appointment took months. Meanwhile, their ships kept showing up in new systems every day, always polite, always non-threatening, but always making it clear that resistance was pointless. The worst part was that some of the humans' changes were actually helpful. Trade. Routes that had been plagued by pirates for decades were suddenly safe. The massive human ships would appear whenever raiders attacked merchant vessels, and the pirates would simply vanish. Not destroyed, not captured, just gone. "Sir," called out his sensor operator, "we have 3 more ships requesting permission to dock. All merchant vessels claiming they want to trade with the humans." It was happening everywhere. Despite official government policies about maintaining independence, individual traders and corporations were lining up to do business with humanity. The humans were offering technologies that were decades ahead of anything else available. Medical equipment that could cure diseases thought to be incurable. Manufacturing systems that could produce materials stronger and lighter than anything known. Energy sources that were clean, cheap, and incredibly efficient. The catch was that to get access to human technology, you had to accept human oversight. Every deal came with advisors, inspectors, and requirements for following human safety and efficiency standards. Slowly but surely, human influence was spreading through galactic society. On the Centauran homeworld, Ambassador Zexthai was dealing with his own problems. The human diplomatic team had set up offices in the capital city, and every day brought new proposals for cooperation. Each proposal was reasonable, beneficial, and completely impossible to refuse without looking like an idiot. "They want to upgrade our power grid," his aide reported during their daily briefing. "They claim they can increase efficiency by 400% while reducing environmental impact to essentially zero. What do they want in return?" Zexthai asked, though he already knew the answer. "Access to our manufacturing databases and permission to establish monitoring stations to ensure optimal system performance." It was always the same. The humans offered incredible benefits in exchange for what seemed like minor concessions. But those minor concessions always included some form of human oversight or control. They were taking over galactic civilization one helpful suggestion at a time. Dr. Velnara had been studying the human diplomatic proposals from a scientific perspective. What she found was both impressive and terrifying. They have mapped out optimization strategies for every major species and civilization in the galaxy, she reported to a closed session of the Galactic Council. "They know our weaknesses, our inefficiencies, and exactly how to fix them, but every solution requires integration with human systems." "Integration or subjugation?" asked Counselor Brix. "That may be the same thing," Velnara replied. "The humans seem to genuinely believe they are helping us, but their idea of help involves restructuring our entire way of life to match their standards of efficiency and logic." Meanwhile, the resistance movements were growing stronger. Admiral Krextos had been secretly meeting with military commanders from dozens of species, trying to put together a coalition that could stand up to human dominance. "We have 47 star systems willing to commit their fleets to a coordinated defense," reported General Throck of the Outer Rim Alliance. "If we can link our forces with the Hegemony Fleet and the Centauran Navy, we might have enough ships to make the humans think twice." Krextos studied the tactical displays showing fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Even combined, their forces would be vastly outnumbered by the human megaships. But quantity had its own advantages. "The humans cannot be everywhere at once," he said. "If we can coordinate simultaneous attacks on multiple targets, we might be able to overwhelm their response capabilities." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only plan they had. The alternative was to accept human dominance and hope that their new overlords would be benevolent. But as the resistance forces prepared for what everyone knew would be the last free war in galactic history, strange reports began coming in from the outer systems. Ships that had engaged human vessels were not being destroyed. They were being disabled and boarded, their crews treated with medical care, and then released with messages about the futility of violence. Captain Zorn of the light cruiser, Freedom, Strike had been one of the first to test human responses to military action. His ship had intercepted a human transport near the Vega system, expecting either to be destroyed or to prove that the massive ships had some weakness. Instead, his ship had simply stopped working. Every system shut down simultaneously, leaving them drifting helplessly in space. A human boarding party had arrived within minutes, but instead of taking prisoners, they had spent hours repairing the cruiser's systems and providing medical treatment for crew members who had been injured during the system shutdown. They treated us like we were sick children who had hurt themselves playing with dangerous toys, Zorn reported to his superiors. They were polite, professional, and completely unafraid. It was like they knew exactly what we were going to do before we did it. Similar reports came in from every system where military forces had tried to test human capabilities. Ships were disabled without being destroyed. Crews were treated and released. Weapons were examined and then returned with detailed explanations of their flaws and suggestions for improvement. The humans were not fighting a war. They were conducting a teaching exercise. As the year-long deadline approached, it became clear that the galaxy was facing something unprecedented. This was not a conquest in any traditional sense. The humans were not seeking territory, slaves, or resources. They were seeking something much more profound. They wanted to change how galactic civilization worked at its most basic level. 3 weeks before the deadline, Admiral Chen sent out another galaxy-wide transmission. This time she was not alone. The screen showed representatives from a dozen different species, all wearing variants of what appeared to be human military uniforms. Citizens of the galaxy, Admiral Chen began. I am pleased to introduce some of our early cooperation partners who have chosen to work with the Human Expansion Collective to improve conditions in their home systems. One by one, the alien representatives spoke about the changes that human assistance had brought to their worlds. Reduced crime, increased prosperity, better health care, more efficient transportation, cleaner energy. Every story was a success story, and every success had come through accepting human guidance. The choice before you is simple, Admiral Chen concluded. You can join us willingly as partners in building a better galaxy, or you can wait for us to provide more direct assistance. Either way, the improvements will happen. The only question is whether you want to be part of the process or have it happen to you. The transmission ended with a countdown timer showing exactly how much time remained before the human ultimatum expired. In the secret military command centers where the resistance was planning their last desperate stand, Admiral Krextos looked around at his fellow commanders. They had ships, weapons, and the will to fight for their independence. But they all knew that they were about to face an enemy that had already defeated them before the first shot was fired. The humans had not just built better weapons. They had built a better way of thinking about warfare, about politics, about civilization itself. They were not conquering the galaxy through force. They were conquering it through competence. And in 3 weeks, everyone would have to choose between accepting human leadership or finding out what happened to species that insisted on doing things the hard way. The countdown continued, and with each passing day, more and more systems announced their intention to accept human partnership. The resistance was melting away as people realized that fighting the humans meant fighting against their own best interests. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to live under the guidance of a species that had spent 40 years learning how to solve every problem that had ever made galactic civilization less than perfect. Whether that would be salvation or slavery was about to be determined by how well everyone could adapt to doing things the human way. The Great War lasted exactly 8 months, 13 days and 6 hours. When it was over, historians would struggle to explain how the largest military alliance in galactic history had been defeated so completely without a single human ship being destroyed in combat. Admiral Krextos stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at displays that showed the impossible. His fleet of 12,000 warships had engaged a human force of less than 50 vessels. The battle should have been a massacre in his favor. Instead, half of his ships were now drifting helplessly in space, their crews unharmed but their weapons completely useless. How? He asked his tactical officer. How did they do this? Lieutenant Vex shook his head in bewilderment. Sir, our weapons fired normally. We scored direct hits on multiple human ships, but the energy just disappeared, like it was absorbed or redirected somewhere else. The human response had been even more disturbing. Instead of returning fire with devastating weapons, they had done something that made Krextos question everything he thought he knew about warfare. They had turned his own fleet against itself. The Vengeance and Stormbearer are still firing on each other, reported the communication officer. Their crews insist they are targeting human ships, but their weapons keep hitting our own vessels. It was happening throughout the battle zone. Ships that should have been attacking the humans were somehow hitting their own allies instead. Missiles launched at human targets would change course in flight and strike friendly vessels. Energy beams aimed at human ships would bend impossible angles and hit Allied cruisers. But the most disturbing part was that none of the crews seemed to realize what was happening. On their screens, they could see themselves scoring hits against human ships. Their sensors confirmed successful attacks against enemy targets. Only outside observers could see that they were actually destroying each other. "This is not possible," Krextos muttered. "You cannot make people see things that are not there." But apparently humans could do exactly that. They had somehow taken control of the sensory systems of entire fleets, making thousands of trained military personnel believe they were fighting the enemy while actually fighting their friends. The battle ended when the last resistance ships either surrendered or became too damaged to continue fighting. Not a single human vessel showed even minor damage. They had defeated the largest military force in galactic history without firing a shot in anger. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system, as calm and professional as always. "Attention all vessels. Medical and repair ships are standing by to assist with damaged ships and injured personnel. Please maintain current positions while we coordinate assistance efforts." Within hours, human medical teams were working throughout the defeated fleet, treating injuries and repairing damage. They worked with the same efficient competence they brought to everything else. And they treated their former enemies with the same care they would show their own people. Captain Thorax of the disabled cruiser. Starhammer watched human engineers repair his ship's power systems with technology he had never seen before. They worked quickly and precisely, replacing damaged components with improved versions that were more efficient and reliable than the original equipment. "Why?" he asked the human engineer working on his bridge systems. "Why are you helping us after we tried to destroy you?" The engineer, a young woman with the calm demeanor that seemed universal among humans, looked up from her work. "Because fighting was never the goal," she explained. "The goal is optimization. War is just one of many inefficient systems that need to be improved." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out wherever resistance forces had tried to stand against human expansion. Ships were repaired, crews were healed, and everyone was given detailed explanations of how their military tactics and technology could be improved. The humans were not conquering through force, they were conquering through superior competence, and they were making it impossible for anyone to stay angry about it. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Zexthai was meeting with the new human administrative team that had taken over the day-to-day operations of galactic government. The council itself still existed, but now it worked within a framework of human oversight and guidance. "Your concerns about maintaining species autonomy are understood and appreciated," said Director Hayes, the human official who now coordinated all interspecies relations. "However, autonomy within an optimized system is different from the chaotic independence that existed before." Zexthai studied the reports that showed how human management had changed galactic civilization in just 8 months. Crime was down by 70% across all major systems. Trade efficiency had improved by 400%. Medical advances were eliminating diseases that had plagued entire species for millennia. "These improvements are impressive," he admitted. "But what about our right to make our own mistakes, to learn through our own experiences?" Director Hayes smiled with what seemed like genuine sympathy. "That right is preserved within appropriate parameters. Each species retains authority over cultural and social decisions that do not impact galactic efficiency or security. You are free to maintain your traditions, your governments, and your ways of life, as long as they do not conflict with optimal resource allocation and conflict prevention. It sounded reasonable, but Zexthai could see the implications. Humans would decide what constituted optimal resource allocation. Humans would determine what qualified as conflict prevention. Every decision that mattered would ultimately be subject to human approval. But the alternative was chaos, war, and suffering on a scale that the galaxy had never fully escaped. The human system was efficient, fair, and peaceful. It was also completely controlled by a single species that believed it knew what was best for everyone else. Dr. Velnara had been appointed to the new Galactic Research Coordination Council, where human scientists worked with alien researchers to accelerate technological development throughout known space. The results were remarkable, but they came with a price she was only beginning to understand. Every research project now requires human approval, she explained to her former colleagues. They review our proposals, suggest improvements, and provide resources and assistance. But they also determine which lines of research are pursued and which are discontinued. The humans claimed that this coordination prevented wasted effort and dangerous experiments. They pointed to the rapid advances in medical technology, space travel, and manufacturing that their oversight had enabled. They were right, but they were also limiting the freedom to explore ideas that they considered inefficient or risky. What happens to the research projects they disapprove? Asked Dr. Krell. Velnara looked uncomfortable. They are redirected toward more productive applications. The researchers are offered alternative projects that utilize their skills in ways that contribute to galactic optimization goals. It was not suppression exactly, but it was control. Human authorities decided what knowledge was worth pursuing and what discoveries were allowed to be made. They were creating a galaxy where scientific progress followed human priorities and human standards of acceptable risk. In the civilian sectors, the changes were even more dramatic. Commander Vextile had been reassigned from military service to planetary administration, where he now worked with human advisors to implement efficiency improvements in local government. Crime in our system has dropped to practically zero, he reported to the monthly administration review. Our new monitoring and intervention protocols identify potential problems before they become serious issues. The monitoring systems were impressive and invasive. Every transaction, every communication, every movement was tracked and analyzed by computer systems that could predict problems before they happened. Crime was prevented by addressing its causes before criminals could act. Conflicts were resolved by automated systems that found optimal solutions for all parties. Privacy had become a luxury that interfered with social optimization. Freedom of movement was limited by systems designed to prevent inefficient travel and resource waste. Personal choices were guided by algorithms that knew what each individual needed better than they knew themselves, but everyone was healthier, wealthier, and safer than they had ever been before. The human system worked, even if it required giving up most of the freedoms that had made galactic civilization interesting. 5 years after the human return, Ambassador Zexthai stood in his office looking out at the transformed galactic capital. The city was cleaner, more efficient, and more beautiful than it had ever been. Crime was virtually extinct, poverty had been eliminated, and every citizen had access to medical care, education, and opportunities for advancement. It was paradise, administered by beings who genuinely believed they were creating the best possible world for everyone. The only problem was that it was their vision of paradise, implemented according to their standards of perfection, and maintained by their definition of what constituted acceptable behavior and efficient resource use. Humanity had returned to galactic civilization not as conquerors but as gardeners. They were tending the galaxy like a vast garden, pruning away inefficiencies, planting new technologies, and harvesting the benefits of optimization on a scale that had never been attempted before. Whether the other species of the galaxy were partners in this great project or simply part of the garden being tended was a question that would be debated by philosophers and historians for generations to come. But there was no denying that the garden was beautiful, productive, and peaceful in ways that the old chaotic galaxy had never been. The humans had kept their promise. They had built a better galaxy for everyone. The only question that remained was whether a perfect garden was still home to the species that had grown wild and free before the gardeners arrived.